Thought it might be worth doing a video on the subject of what compels people to believe what they believe. Um, I was always an atheist, I guess. This sort of relates to a comment the amazing atheist made. Um, that it's likewise with him. I mean, it's almost like I was born an atheist in the sense that I never had any faith or confidence um, in the idea of God. And I was raised in the church, Methodist church, and my first memories are, going to this institution, you know, and having to get dressed, and who wanted to do that? And I grew up in the South, and it was warm, and it was pretty hot sometimes even, and it was just ruining a perfectly good Sunday. And you go to this organization, this place. There's kneeling and praying and singing and you know reading lines. The minister says something, then the whole congregation says blah 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 blah, and therefore blah blah blah, and just this. And it's like, I didn't know what a cult was at that age, but it just seemed very cult-like. This was not natural at all. I saw there was just no natural feeling in this place at all. I mean, the whole organ thing was spooky. you know, the whole thing was just a bizarre and alien universe. And then I also had to go to Sunday school, and so then they would tell these stories, do this for kids kind of preaching, where they try to Jack and Jill the stories. But it almost worked in reverse, because you couldn't really make any sense out of these stories. So I mean, I wanted to, there's really two sides to the atheist story. There's the side that, when you become a little older, you learn all these facts. You become scientifically literate, and you can see the obvious, compelling evidence that matter in this universe, everything almost that isn't influenced by human intervention, is all controlled by these very crude and simple forces. I mean, there's no evidence of the hand of God in science. It just isn't there. And so I mean, that becomes, it verifies the you feel towards the propaganda of the cult. And so anyway, I mean, there are, the thing I want to get to is, there's the scientific argument that should be compelling to any person of literacy, who can understand concepts and logic, and that should be persuasive for those who have been trapped by their early conditioning and found some comfort in religion, or some kind of logic in religion. Science should give them something to ponder. But for those of us, like I said, who didn't believe in Santa Claus and Easter rabbits and the whole Grimm's fairy tales, or any of this nonsense, and saw life a little darker than that right from the start, or at least found life very confusing and disorienting. There was these stories in the Bible, and they were just such a turnoff. And so for me, the ones that really stick out in my memory, the ones that gave me the most trouble as I took place. The first was the whole Genesis story. It was just sounded so strange that you have paradise, and somehow you have a God who created all this stuff, and then he creates his own enemy. And how did that happen? What are you talking about? And so then the enemy creates this thing they call temptation, which I certainly understood as a child, because you're children are selfish, and so they're gonna. Yeah, I was tempted. I wanted a donut. I wanted a donut. I mean, it wasn't too hard to figure that out. Um, and so I mean the whole idea, and then what really disturbed me was the fact that okay, this whole preposterous thing happens in the first place. You have paradise, and then you screw it all up. Um, Knowledge is bad. I thought I was supposed to be learning stuff. Everybody's bitching at me because I can't write my name right, and yet they're telling me knowledge is an evil thing. And I'm like, well, why am I trying to write my name? And why am I reading shit? And why are you making me write? And just seemed very strange, very bizarre. And then the worst part of it is then you find out about this whole punishment thing. And the one that just stuck out. I had three sisters, and the one that stuck out in my brain was women will always have childbirth because of Eve's sin, and pain in childbirth. And I just, what the hell is that about? I mean, what did my sisters do? I mean, that was my question. I mean, they didn't freaking eat no apples or do any crap. What are you going to harass them for? And so right there, I was like, oh, that's pretty dark. And so then, as I got more literate in the Bible, you hear these other stories, these Bible stories. And then another one that stuck out in my head was, there was this section in the Old Testament, and they're talking about, the law and what equals what. And there's some story about, it's not a story, but just a metaphor or whatever, a comparison where they point out that, let's say you have a hole in your backyard, you dug a hole, and let's say a man's donkey falls into it, or his burro, or his mule, or whatever, and it dies, or it breaks its leg, or whatever. That, under the law of the Old Testament, would be a greater crime than if somebody's slave fell in the hole and broke their leg and died. And I was like, whoa, what the fuck are these people about? I mean, that's crazy. I mean, I liked animals, but a man getting killed is less of a crime than a donkey? So, I mean, right there, you're just, what? These people are crazy. And then there was another Old Testament thing where, I guess it's just because sometimes you visualize some of this stuff. And so, oops, freeze. There's a story about if you find a dead bird on the road, don't eat it. You see, that's the Old Testament logic. No, give it to a poor person, or a homeless guy. And I was like, well, man. So you're advised not to eat it because it might poison you, it might make you sick. But it's okay to let the poor people eat the rotten bird. And that just seemed, I was a selfish kid, but gee, I already kind of figured out that, I don't have a right to make somebody else sick. I mean, that's bullshit. And I really didn't understand the whole idea of why some people had to live shittier lives than other people. I mean, that just, I didn't understand the whole commerce thing, and that everybody's gonna fall into this scale somewhere, and their standard of living is going to be dictated by their mental capacity, or their ability to manipulate the system, or their ability to do this, or I just didn't realize that we're all going to be measured, and so I really didn't think of poor people as lesser people. I just thought they would somehow, something went wrong and they were trapped in a bad place. And so, I mean, it just didn't make any logical sense to me that I would somehow think they deserve worse bird food than me. So that that was another one, just scary. So let's see, what else do I got here on this list that I probably can't read. Oh yeah, so the big one is the disciples and Judas, and so that was that was like more towards my teenage years. Oh, I'm gonna run out of time, bummer. So maybe that's a subject, but anyway, Judas, Jesus' answer to Judas: the poor will be with you always. Very depressing. And why would disciples go against a God, Jesus, that